Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of The View from the Top. And what an edition we've got for you. We've got some great guests today. We've got some exciting news, and we're going to have a lot of discussion and debate. So if you're out there in LinkedIn world, and we know there's literally hundreds of you who listen in every week to the show, please let us know you're there. So please, make a comment in the comments box, say hi, just say where you're from, where in the world you are, company you work for, just say hi so we know you're there. We want to know, who's with us today. But what about our guests? Well, we've got some great guests on the show today. I'm delighted to say that one of our guests is Bill Graebel. Now, Bill Graebel is someone that I'm sure everybody out there knows, a true legend of our industry. So let's just bring Bill on so we can all say hi to Bill. Bill, it's great to have you on the show. It's absolutely wonderful to see you, and thanks so much for being our guest today. We've also got, as ever, we've got Julia Onslow-Cole. So Julia, great to have you on the show. Really good to see you. I know you've got some great information to share with us again today. So thanks a lot, Julia. And as I said, if you're out there, let us know you're there. We want to know who's out there. We don't know you're out there unless you write in the comments box on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube or somewhere. So let us know you're there, and then we can have a conversation with you and take your all your comments, all your thoughts, all your perspectives on board. I'm also delighted to say that we've got Nitzan Yudan. Hi there, Nitzan. Good to see you. All right. And Nitzan's the CEO at Benivo, and we've got a really big announcement regarding Benivo. We're calling it a new Benivo, and we're launching that in a couple of weeks' time. But we want to give you a sneaky peek preview of it. So Nitzan will be saying a few words about that in a bit. But let me start with you, Bill. Let me just say hi, and I've got to say, everybody, that Bill is possibly. Well, I've never actually heard anybody say a bad word about Bill Graebel. I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you here, Bill, but you've got a reputation in our industry of being one of the nice guys, one of the good guys out there. And I've got a particular story. This is my favorite personal Bill Graebel story. I just want to share with everybody out there in LinkedIn world, so you know what a decent, good guy Bill is. And this dates back to the days when I was running the Forum for Expatriate Management. And we were running an event in Las Vegas. It was the annual awards, the Honor Awards. And it was a crowded reception in the days when we could actually not socially distance. We were also crowded in a big reception hall. And somebody approached me, I can't remember her name, but she was very upset because she bought a ticket to be at the Emmys and she wasn't on the table plan. And she said to me, help me, I need to be on the table plan. I said, don't worry, I'll sort it out. And I saw one of the organisers, the other side of the room, and I saw her walk through the room very fast to this crowded room to get to the other side to get the organiser to make sure that this lady had a place on the table. As I was walking through like this, my elbow bumped Bill's elbow. Bill at the time was holding a glass of red wine. The red wine went all over Bill's chest. And he was wearing it was a black tie event. He was wearing his tux. He was stained. It looked like a gangland killing. It looked dreadful. And the thing was that I knew, and Bill didn't, is that Bill had actually won the award for Global Mobility Personality of the Year. And so Bill had to go up on stage in a wine-stained claret tuxedo. And I was just mortified. I sent a couple of bottles of champagne over to Bill's table. There wasn't much else I could do. And Bill, bless you, you never made a fuss, you never complained, and you were such a gentleman, and I love you forever for that, Bill. So it's a pleasure having you on this show. You are a true gentleman of our industry.
Well, thanks for your kind comments, Brian, and life happens. And so you get a lemon, you make lemonade out of it, and life moves on.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, and it wasn't lemonade we were making. I think it was a very nice red wine. But anyway, it's a great pleasure having you on the show. And I know your company is 70 years old this year, so we'll be talking more about Graebel and everything that's been going on in the business over the last, well, not so much over the last 70 years, but the present and the future. Before I do, I want to turn to another subject, actually, before we start talking with Bill and indeed with Julia. And that I mentioned at the beginning is that we at Benivo, we've got a big announcement. I just want to sort of talk about what that big announcement is, and then maybe just say hello to Nitzan. And it's this. I mean, many of you probably know Benivo as digital destination services. Well, what we're launching now is completely different. We're calling it New Benivo. And what it will be is a platform where anybody can access any supplier, any employee can access any supplier to manage their move. So they can manage their tax provider, they can manage their immigration provider, they can manage their RMC, they can manage all their services. So they can get their tax briefing, their immigration briefing, their RMC briefing, all in one place. And this is something that we can put together at what is effectively no cost to the Global Mobility team. It's all included within the normal fee that goes out to the assignee. I'm not going to say much more about that, other than the fact we've got a big launch on the 4th of June. But what I do want to do is to introduce Nitzan Yudan, who would say just a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on into Julia's talk about the Around the World tour.
So Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brian, and hi, everyone. So yes, on the 4th of June, we will do a live demo here with you on LinkedIn, and we'll share a lot more information. But just to give a 1-minute summary of what are we going to talk about, right? So the last few months obviously have been very tough for all of us. But in Benivo, it was a transformational period for us. We won new clients, we managed to grow a lot with existing clients, and we've been working extremely hard on our product in order to further improve our digital destination support and expand it to cover everything that destination support could provide using digital. So housing advice, school selection, moving, choosing country settling in, and all of that powered by insights from colleagues. So the star ratings and reviews of other people in the company sharing their experience. We are adding to that even a platform that is for the spouse, for the partner to connect, and all of that also has our pay later, the interest-free cash advancement. That has been our digital destination. We are expanding this core, and what we are going to announce in 2 weeks is that we are adding to that another layer that is what we call the New Benivo, that allows to create a single platform for the employee for everything relocation related, where they can see everything they need to do and how to do it, right? Is it tax, immigration, services delivered by the RMC, as well as company-specific actions, signing documents, uploading the documents, completing. We call it auto-magically complete any form. We want to make sure that no employee needs again to complete the same information twice, whether it's a copy of your passport or the date of birth of your spouse. They should not spend time on doing that, and at the same time they can see the progress they are making. The corporate can see the progress, and it all results by saving time and money, and most important, can be implemented in days. We are not talking about months of implementation or a year, but something that can go live in days. So we are really excited about that and about all the partners that we are bringing with that, and a lot more will come, including a live demo on the 4th of June.
Thank you so much, Nitzan. I'm certainly very excited to be able to share that with the world on the 4th of June. Let me just sort of move on the conversation a bit. So thank you very, very much, Nitzan. I think we've got a record number of people on this session, and we normally get about 5,000 views within about 72 hours. But live, we normally get about 200, and I think today we're close on 300 people. So I think that's testament both to Julia and to Bill. Clearly, there's a bit of pulling power there, and it's great to have you guys both there. But in terms of where people are from, I'm seeing people from, well, Carl's from Singapore, from Ireland, from Florida, from South Carolina, Denver, New Delhi, the Chicago suburbs, Bangalore, Mariana Kudel from Lisbon, from Kristen from Philly, Fiona Williams from London. I think you're in London, Fiona, correct me if I'm wrong. Kim Franson from Graebel, Warsaw. So that's your original office, isn't it, Bill? All over the world, we've got people coming in. So it's wonderful to have you there. We've got people from all over the world, from San Francisco. I see people coming in from Turkey, from Dallas, from Seattle, from Cleveland, from Houston, from Bangalore. So let me actually put a question out there to the audience, because you're all over the world. And we had a little poll last week, which was, when are you going to shake hands with somebody again? Let me ask a different question. And the question is this: when do you think you're next going to travel cross-border, business or holiday? We'll pick up on that in a while, but let me just bring Julia into the conversation. So Julia, good to see you again. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Really well, thank you.
Julia, when do you think you're next going to travel cross-border?
I'd like to say July. Yes, I think I want to go to France.
And what about business trips?
September.
Okay. And let us know out there, you guys in LinkedIn world who are listening in, when you think you're next going to get on a plane and go cross-border. But before we do that, what I do want to do is just to get Julia doing her round the world tour. And I think you've got some pretty interesting news for us today. So Julia, do you want to sort of just give us a bit of your world tour? And then whilst Julia is talking, do use the comments box. And if you've got any questions for Julia, ask them so we know what it is that you want to ask Julia. And Julia will try and answer all your questions as we go through. But Julia, we've got a very, very busy show. So why don't you just dive straight in? Am I right to think you're going to start with China today?
Yes. And as you know, I'm always starting with China because China's the country that is back on its feet the quickest, and it can really give us insights to what's happening around the world. So since last week, we've seen a real increase in activity, in immigration activity in China. The travel ban continues, and as you all know, the ban is only letting people in who have a valid visa that was issued after the 28th of March, or if you're a Chinese citizen or a resident of Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan. And we don't expect the travel ban to be lifted any time soon, but life is getting back to normal within China. And I spoke to my partner, Becky Xia, who's in Shanghai on Monday, and she said that the Chinese government's really encouraging people to go back to work. Most of the restaurants are opened, and in many Chinese cities, you can actually go to the cinema. But there's continued concern about another wave of infection. And she said that the government are producing all sorts of reports to just remind people of the dangers. And she said that in Shanghai, there was a report earlier this week where it was anonymized, so it was just a person, but they had actually, the government had tracked and traced everyone, and that person had infected 350 more than 350 other people. And what they did is they produced this list, and they actually listed out the relationship of these other people to the person. So they put auntie, uncle, cousin, co-worker. And she said it was really interesting, and the government are doing a lot of things like that to try and make people be really careful about making sure that they abide as much as they can by social distancing. Now, there is a significantly and really important update I want to give you all, because we've been talking over the last 3 weeks about how do you bring back people who have a visa, who you're desperate to bring back into China. And we've been talking about the differences if your executives have A visas or B. And we said, if you have A visas, you can go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just get an invitation letter and then get a business visit visa from a consulate overseas. You go into China and you then are allowed to turn that back into your original work permit. But we said if you had a B visa, you had to go through all the agony of a pre-employment authorization. Now, the really breaking news point this week is that we have had a lot of success for B visa holders just going through the first option, simply getting a letter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and presenting that, getting a business visit visa, and then that way getting back to China. So that's really, really worthwhile knowing, because it will save you an awful lot of trouble. So things are very fluid, and obviously I'm only just telling you what our practice has been and what we're seeing, but anything we can do to help everybody to remobilize and not go through unwanted processes will be very good. I mean, what we're seeing is that the pharmaceutical sector is experiencing a real boom in China. And also another thing is that the Chinese government have relaxed foreign ownership rules on banks, and this has created substantial interest from the banking industry. And as a result of that, we are seeing a number of banks wanting to send people into China. Also, China has this new program of an electronic Chinese currency, which is attracting overseas investments. And China's looking very hard at improving its regulation. President Xi Jinping also reinforced his commitment to the Belt and Road Initiative, and he made an announcement over the last week saying that students coming from countries, the Belt and Road countries, who are studying in China, he'd really encourage those to actually stay in China. So altogether, we're seeing a lot of investment initiatives, which is creating a lot of desire to bring back work permit holders to China. And also, we've had lots of inquiries from Chinese companies who are looking outwards at investment, and particularly in Europe. And my colleagues, Christine Sullivan and Jo Antons, have been working on a lot of those strategic things that you can do in Europe around the intracompany transferee directive and other things. So I think that that's something really important to bear in mind.
And I think you also wanted to cover Singapore, is that right?
Yes, so just looking at Singapore, I mean, what we're seeing is, again, unlikely to lift the travel ban anytime soon. But the circuit breaker, which is the lockdown, will be lifted on the 1st of June. And again, since last week, we've had announcements about this 3-stage gradual return on the lockdown. There's very few cases that are being given permission to come in outside of the travel ban. And almost most companies have almost given up trying to bring in people outside the travel ban, unless you're in the health or transport industry. The point I wanted to make this week is that you can make any sorts of application if you're in Singapore, but the authorities are being very strict. And in the last week, as an example for you all, we had an application for a newborn baby that was born during lockdown, family all in Singapore, dependent pass application. And I was talking to Mark Buchanan, who's our partner in Singapore, and he was saying that it was refused. They had to go back and explain, no, the whole family are in Singapore. And you know, the authorities then granted. So you have to keep on, and you have to, you don't be put off if you get a refusal, you know, keep trying.
I think they have had a very tough regime in Singapore. And I see Carl Hagstrom, one of our viewers, has just said he's based out in Singapore, because Singapore went overboard.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Carl. Yeah, Carl knows, yeah. Also, those on visit passes, we've had lots of inquiries, and I never mind answering questions afterwards on LinkedIn, but do you remember we've had lots of inquiries about people stuck in Singapore on visit passes, and we are seeing this continued flexibility so we can keep extending. But people who are stuck outside, people who were granted new employment passes and haven't been able to use them, we think after 3 months, they'll have to start again. So that's pretty bad news for those people. So I just wanted to say a couple of words about the Middle East. There is concern in the Middle East across the whole region as we approach the end of Ramadan and the Eid celebrations and the holidays that will come with the Eid celebrations. Because across the Middle East, there's still quite big pockets of infection, and the government are worried that if they lift the lockdown and too soon with the holiday celebrations, there'll be another big spike. But there's an exciting announcement that was announced on Monday in the UAE to say that if you're a holder of a valid UAE residency permit and you're currently waiting to get in and you're desperate to get in, you should be able to get in starting from the 1st of June. Now, I do have a really important update on that because the announcement was really exciting and everyone got really, really overexcited about it. But we have then been making applications, and my partners Haida Hussein and Marcin Kubrick, we've made lots of applications, but actually numbers of them have failed. And so again, this is just our practice. It's anything written and it's just what we're seeing. We think that the government are prioritizing those with split families, and we've seen a lot of this, so the family dependents are stuck outside the UAE, and we think those are the ones that are being granted. So Emirates and Etihad have inbound flights from Frankfurt and London to return stranded people who are stuck outside the UAE.
Okay, that's fascinating. And I think you also want to say a few words about the UK, is that right?
Yes, so just keeping it short this week, but just wanted to mention the UK because it's very big news in the UK that from June we're going to have this quarantine on all arrivals except those arrivals from the Irish Republic. It's really to bear in mind that there's more than 20,000 British citizens who are actually still stranded outside the UK, who are waiting to get to be repatriated, and obviously they're going to have to quarantine as well. And there's been a lot of representation from countries around Europe. This morning, there's a lot of reports about Greece saying, we won't put a quarantine on people coming on holiday from the UK to Greece if you won't do the same. And I think the government's literally under so much pressure, particularly, from countries where British people would normally go on holiday, to have some reciprocity. And they have said they are considering replacing this kind of blanket quarantine with some targeted measures between countries that they feel that there's robust infection controls. So they're going to do a sort of 3-week rolling review, and we will keep updating you about that, but that's important.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia. What I want to do now, and we've got, thank you so much, Julia. What I want to do now is bring Bill into the conversation. So Bill, great to have you here. I think there's quite a fan base out there of people. So if anybody's out there in LinkedIn world wants to say hello to Bill, then and tell us your own favorite Bill stories, then let's get nothing bad, guys. Let's get them out there. And also, I'm sure I know there's quite a lot of people on this who work for Graebel or who have worked for Graebel, who are clients of Graebel. So if you've got any questions, again, feed through the questions as we go through, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. Now, I'm going to start off by just telling my one of the things that amazes me about Bill Graebel. I've already mentioned what a nice guy you are, but for those who don't know this, I don't know how many of you know about Bill and his skiing, but I want to share this publicly because I think it's incredible. Bill, you're a manic skier. I think that's fair to say. And can you tell us how many months now you have gone consecutively skiing? Winter, summer, fall?
Yeah, Brian. So the month of May was my 320th consecutive month. So that's not quite 27 years where I've skied at least one day. And I've had a variety of injuries along the way that I was able to at least get a day in before I had a surgery or something like that. And then, yeah, I'm fortunate, knock wood, and I hope to be able to do it until I'm 70 years old. And I don't know how many months that'll be, but hopefully I got the ability to do it till then.
Well, I tell you, I don't know if that's a world record, but it certainly should be. I suspect it's a relocation industry record. I can't imagine in the relocation industry that's done 322 months consecutive skiing. So just incredible, Bill. Again, hats off to you.
Thank you.
Let's move on. I mean, I know your company was founded 70 years ago by your father in Warsaw, Wisconsin, and it moved from being just, I suppose, one man in a van to a national van line to an international van line, and then you got out of the van business altogether, and you're now purely an RMC. I mean, that was a major pivot. We've covered that. If anybody's interested, I did an interview with Bill, A View from the Top, in the days when we did podcasts, and that's actually on the Benivo website. So I won't go over that ground again, but if anybody's interested, there's a very in-depth interview with Bill that's on our website that covers all the history and Bill's inspirations. What I want to do today is really focus a bit more on the current and the future. Everybody was going around over the last couple of years coming out with their 2020 visions. And I think it's fair to say that every single company in the world got it wrong. You know, I don't think there's a single company out there that thought 2020 was going to turn out how it has. So tell us, Bill, in terms of Graebel, I mean, how did you cope with coronavirus when it first happened? You know, how did work change for you all?
Good question, Brian. How did I first cope with it? Well, I probably started coming to grips with it in maybe the middle of February. You know, the pandemic hadn't really hit in the U.S., but, you know, you could see it was going to, and it was starting to, you know, turn up outside of Italy and Europe. And I had just come back from being in Prague and London, and I thought, oh my gosh, I probably got exposed on the subways or in Heathrow or something like that. But then I started connecting the dots in terms of, well, what is this going to mean to commerce? What is this going to mean to the free flow of talent and just people? And to be very honest, I was quite anxious in the month of February, and anxious as if you were starting to realize a hurricane was going to come and just demolish your town, if you will. And you could see it on the radar. You know, each day you could see it intensifying, and you just didn't know how fast and how hard it would hit. So I was concerned for our people. I was concerned, you know, as a business operator, you know, how well can we possibly function 100% from home? You know, our business continuity plan had never tested 100% of our workforce simultaneously working from.
You are 100% from home.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. With the exception of a few people that are, you know, infrastructure, IT, and so forth. But yes, virtually 100%.
If we go back to say February of this year or early March, before everything sort of started going, you know, started hitting us, how many people then would be working from home on a typical day before the pandemic struck?
15-ish to 20% of our workforce, I would say. Most of them were remote workers, but, you know, we had kind of a flexible policy as well. And, you know, some people were taking a day a week kind of thing, but obviously nothing to the scale that we're forced to do. And I'm really proud of our teams, the speed at which we were able to kind of mobilize to work from home. The work that our IT team did, you know, I think every company's IT teams are heroes in enabling commerce. Yeah, so quickly. And, you know, we're all learning new ways of working, both in terms of workflow and, you know, through Zoom and conferences like this. So, you know, by and large, those early days, it was quite ironic because we also had a record-setting first quarter. And, you know, so it was a tale of two cities, you know, as you talked about coming into 2020 and your strategic plan. You know, between mid-February and mid-March, we opened in 3 locations simultaneously. We've never attempted that. That's how bullish we were on 2020.
Yeah, you've got a rapid growth curve, haven't you?
Yeah, so on March 10th, we actually opened in Bangalore, India. But prior to that, earlier in February, we opened in Geneva, Switzerland, and in Munich. And yeah, so it's like, oh darn, of all the rotten time to, you're just out of the gate like gangbusters in the first quarter. You've obviously ratcheted up your expense levels with the opening of new offices, and we also had 100 new job acquisitions in the pipeline that frankly we just had to shut down. And so it was unsettled. It was kind of like that rotten feeling we all had on 9/11, except it just, that was an event, and this is a marathon. And but I've kind of gotten over that rotten feeling thing and have turned the lens more toward, okay, how do we make the best out of a bad situation, and how do we keep our people engaged, and how do we elevate the duty of care that's so essential in a time like this?
Okay, well, we'll get on to duty of care later, but I just want to focus in on working from home. And in fact, I'll ask the audience a question, and I'll ask you the same question, Bill. And that's this: working from home. How much is that now ingrained? I mean, do you think we're ever going to go back to working in offices in the way that we did, or has the world changed forever? And the question I want to get out there, and please in the audience, give us your comments in the comments box. We had lots of comments through. Is, are you enjoying working from home, or are you desperate to go back into the office? And if we go out, say, 2 years, do you think that we will still be working? And from your point of view, Bill, do you need the premises now that you had then? Are your premise requirements going to change? Is this a silver lining of that we're going to see? Is that there's going to be a lot less need for heavy overheads in terms of rent?
Yeah, several questions there, Brian. Over the longer term, I think, at least in our organization, there will be more of a hybrid type schedule, and some of that'll get a dry run as we go and start flexing out phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whatever, of return to office. Initially, obviously, maximum number, maybe 50% of your people would be the maximum until there's some level of vaccine. The reconfiguration cost per work or per employee, some of the studies we've been assisting with and monitoring, it's about $1,800 an employee to reconfigure the office environment to meet the CDC or WHO standards. But the genie's out of the bottle as well in terms of work-life balance, and we're not going to artificially stuff that cap back in the bottle, because we've seen really no regression in productivity. But that said, there are certainly some people that are itching to get back to the office because their homes aren't really the best place for them to be productive for any number of reasons. And so this is all about finding a balance, and it's all about making the workplace safe and secure. The transformation of it, in a interesting way, is almost like converting it into a clubhouse, a place where people gather, a place where people, obviously they're going to be hugging for a while, but a chance for people to kind of re-socialize, if nothing else. And then finally, to your question, I think there's a need for us to have a global footprint, obviously, with a presence on the ground for a variety of administrative reasons and close proximity to customers and supplier partners and so forth. But I do think you're going to see an increase in the number of people who are stationed out of a given office, because you are going to have kind of this hybrid model where, like in Denver, for example, today there's maybe 300 people based out of there, but in the future, could there be 400 people based out of there, even though we've kind of spread out the desk and work surface areas? But because there's a rotation, more people actually would have a report to a facility, attached to them.
So let me bring in some of the comments from the audience. I mean, by and large, I think people are saying they're absolutely loving working from home, but there are one or two going the other way. So we've got, what have we got? Kate Scott, I love it. Melanie Vitoni Hicks, I love working from home. Elizabeth Moyle, I love it. Valerie Kelch, I love, and love is in capitals, working from home. Livia Rivalova, I love it. Carmen Flores, love it. Here we go differently. Amit Ghosh, as a response to current situation is surely working well, but would love to return to work, missing all the high fives. Someone else, love it. Catherine Reed, I miss the office. I still because co-workers at least 3 days a week. Love it. Another love. Glenna Jennings, working from home started out good, but there are a few bumps in the road. It's not working great. I'm really enjoying it now. Elizabeth Moyles, here's one actually. Elizabeth would have to wear pants. Lol. Now I have to say, let's get honest here, Bill. I'm sitting here in a shirt, and it's a sweltering hot day here in London. And you know what? I'm wearing. Can you see that? I'm wearing my short. I'm wearing my short trousers, my short pants here with this top on. So I've blown a secret there. Now, what about you, Bill? Are you in long pants or short there?
Well, I got to be transparent and honest with you, Brian. I too am in shorts.
There he goes. It's good weather.
But this is really only the second day I've worn shorts, working from home, and in part because yesterday we had record heat here in Denver, and it's the same thing today. So I thought, in the spirit of summer approaching, I'm putting on my shorts.
Okay, well, there we go. So let's move on a bit, Bill. We've talked about how you're coping with, or you did cope with coronavirus, but what about going forward? What would you say your current priorities are? What are the things you're looking at now?
Oh, I think there's a couple of obvious ones. Certainly the duty of care we have to our workforce when we do bring them back, and it'll be on a voluntary basis. There's a lot of agility we have to support each and every individual's personal circumstances. And so we're going to be agile and listening a lot, quite frankly, to our workforce and what are their needs, what are their expectations, what are their concerns. So that's kind of on the internal side. On the business side, of course, cash flow, monitoring very closely client payment behavior. There are various companies that are going to be challenged. And so as a supplier to them, and then as somebody that ultimately then turns around and takes client cash and pays suppliers, I think the industry is going to get tested that way over the course of the summer, especially if there's a fast ramp up in July, like many are saying. So that's one aspect of it. Engagement is a big part, and we're doing our best to try to keep our workforce engaged, working from home. We don't have those touch points we used to have as coworkers, as supervisors, and so that's a big area of focus. But ultimately, I think from our responsibility point of view is we have to really pay attention to the details of the needs of our transferees going forward. The vast majority of people that are going to be relocating in the near future are kind of what I call essential workers for their company or their employer. So a lot of folks were ready, teed up to relocate, and then suddenly had to put the brakes on. So there's a little bit of a backlog there. And, now those early adopters, once things open up, certainly their employers see them as filling a strategic need at destination. But at the same time, I think every human being that would go through the relocation process is going to have a little bit of fear, and they'll offset that fear with courage. But so they're also going
to trauma there. I think there's a level of post-traumatic stress disorder we're going to see, where people are just reluctant. I mean, I saw in the comments earlier, I saw, I can't remember who it was, somebody made the point that they wouldn't go on a train or a plane until there's a vaccine. And I know our industry is hit pretty bad. I'm sure the travel industry is hit 1,000 times worse than our industry. But do you think the volumes are going to come back? And I mean, how much did your volumes fall off a cliff when this happened? I mean, a lot of companies I know just said they weren't moving anybody. They're doing some emergency repatriations. But what happened to to Graebel's volumes or your clients' volumes? And where are you back now? Are you seeing any movement back?
Yeah. To be quite honest, right now is the low point. It was very strong through the first quarter. And then, there was stuff in the pipeline that continued on in April that, had dates scheduled provisionally out in the future, and we'll see if they're able to do that based upon the local regulations. So in terms of initiation volume, it had remained very strong up until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the volume coming in is probably about 50% of what we expected across most clients.
Yeah.
Granted, this is intern season, and interns are such an important part of most major corporations. And many of those corporations have just simply pivoted their intern program to a virtual one. But nevertheless, we're kind of part of the onboarding and front end of that virtual internship. So, you know, and as you all know, that's not necessarily the most lucrative piece of business that an RMC does. But, you know, that's kept the lights on, and, you know, we're hunkered down, if you will, in terms of managing all the discretionary cost out of the business, and, you know, making sure, again, that we're staying engaged and listening to our workforce, because without an engaged workforce, how in the world can you deliver great service? And similarly with our suppliers, we're trying to be very proactive and having good dialogues with our suppliers, because again, without them, we're nothing. They're the first and final mile of what represents Graebel, and we want to be in a position where fundamentally we put them in a position of success, as opposed to, you know, if they fail, we fail. And so there's a lot of focus on that as well.
Okay, and there's another question I wanted to ask, and Bill, I'm going to ask it of you in the same way I'm going to ask the audience as well. So please do, you know, give us your thoughts, people out there in LinkedIn world. And that's this, which is that I think there's two things going on here at the moment. There's going to be a lot of pressure coming out of this from the corporates to keep prices down. In whichever way they're going to try and keep prices down, because they have been suffering badly and they've got shareholders to answer to, and the screws will be on. But conversely, if we look at it from our point of view, from the movers' point of view, from the RMC's point of view, from everybody else's point of view, our costs are going up. Because to take it at the most basic level, we've got to provide masks, we've got to provide gloves, we've got to provide hand sanitizer, we've got to provide social distancing. Some of our supplies might have been going up. So my question is this: over the next, let's say, 18 months, which way do you think pricing is headed? Do you think pricing is going to be headed down because of the pressure coming from the corporates, and obviously maybe even a level of oversupply in the RMC industry because of lower volumes? Or do you think pricing is going to head up because costs are pushing up? So I'll ask you, Bill, and also, as I said, I'm asking the audience as to which way you think pricing is going to head over the next, say, 18 months to 2 years.
That's a great question, Brian.
That's why you get the job you've got, Bill.
Yeah, I run a relocation management company, not a hedge fund, so hard knowing. But I would say there's a lot of creative tension there, Brian. You hit on the two issues, right? I mean, the reality is there's more supply than there is demand, so that would generally tend to push prices down. However, there's a catalytic moment in time that has changed the underlying cost structure of virtually every service inside the verticals needed in relocation management. So even the people that are the pet transporters, the temporary housing, if on any given day there's only a third of the available rooms that are normally in the stock for temporary housing, but those rooms have to have a cooling off period for a period of time. Initially, I think in a situation like that, cash flow is very important to that segment of the industry. So I think they'll be a little slower, perhaps, in trying to compensate through their pricing per unit, the offset of the rooms that are sitting idly. As an RMC, all this does is just accelerate the motivation and focus to automate as much as you possibly can and eliminate redundant data entry. There's an interesting bifurcation in the industry as well. I think some clients want a touchless relocation. So in parts, what that means is, very little human intervention as a consultant, and everything just be delivered, on kind of a self-service standpoint. On the other hand, again, kind of coming back to people's expectations of safety and so forth, and cleanliness. who isn't going to want a safe environment, and who isn't going to want to have people coming into their homes that, have an established health history and aren't posing a risk, but yet are also taking appropriate precautions. So I think most logical people will understand that those things, are either necessary or best practices. And at the end of the day, as offerers of service, I guess, to clients, we're just going to have to give them line of sight and complete transparency in terms of what the cost basis is of the performance of the service. Certainly, you're not going to use this to make any sort of windfall on their portfolio of business. But I do think it's our obligation to show them, and we are doing that, and we're getting the information from the people in our, suppliers to really break that out. So it's a logical, frankly, portrayal then of what hopefully the clients will take back into their organizations and say, hey, we got to adjust our budgets by this much per transfer, or we have to then find a way to do fewer transfers, and then again, just focusing more on the essential relocations for the near term.
Absolutely. And let me feed in some of the comments that we're getting from LinkedIn. I think people are tending to agree. I see scissors effect. We got, that it's going both ways. Household goods costs are higher now, even domestically here for moves to Hawaii or Alaska. The household goods costs have gone up. And then people are saying, technology might come in. Is there a demand or requests for cameras with live feed to customers who are not able to be present for their packing? Higher cost, lower rates. Rob Lesser says, costs will have to go down, salary structures will reduce, but companies will focus heavily on reducing numbers of transfers for the really big savings. And I think that's a great point that Rob makes, which is that the easiest way to cut the total cost of an assignment program is to move less people, which clearly isn't good news for our industry. But do you think we're going to see a bit of that as the cost pressure comes in?
Yeah, I would think that's a natural reaction, Brian. And I think, structurally, until business travel resumes to the normal threshold that, up until the middle of March, we were all accustomed to. One of the things that we're very much tracking is, how does the airline industry come back? Because in most cases, without a flight, it's pretty hard to relocate. Most people don't take a boat across the Atlantic to relocate anymore. And, you're certainly within Europe and within the United States, you can still affect a relocation by driving. But in particular, I think the cost, the time delays, the quarantine on the other end are going to certainly be suppressors of demand for the intercontinental tranche of relocation for, the definite foreseeable future until there's some level of vaccine or otherwise assurance that, there's a relatively easy treatment for catching COVID.
Let me move on to a different subject. And that is, in many ways, the future of our profession. And I mean, not the service we provide, but the number of competitors are out there, the number of RMCs out in the industry. I mean, we saw going back for a few years a wave of mergers. We saw, I'm trying to think of the ones now. I mean, Sterling Lexicon was a great one. Wyker and the MI Group was another. BGRS and Relo, correct if I'm wrong, is it Relo Japan? I can't remember the company that bought BGRS. And of course, the biggie of them all was Servocatus. Let me just ask you the question, going back to that previous era before COVID-19 came along, when Servocatus came along back in November of last year, what was your reaction within Graebel? You must have looked at this and thought, oh my God, two gorillas have got together. There's going to be one really big gorilla out there. And you're a pretty sizable organization yourself, but obviously, they would have been the big monster as a combined organization. What was your reaction when you heard about that merger? We'll talk about obviously what's happened since later, but take you back to November 19. What was your view when you first heard about that merger?
Honest reaction is sweet. And the reason for that is the multiples that the most recent mergers have offered. Historically, our industry probably trades at a multiple of 6 or 7 times EBITDA. And these recent deals in late 18 all the way up to the present, the valuations on the companies are like 10x EBITDA. So that would be cool if we had a desired exit strategy, which we don't. But it was, I guess, validated.
I'll just comment on that one. Just so Graebel is definitely going to stay an independent company.
As long as I do my job well, yeah, that's the goal.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Sorry, I interrupted, Bill, but I thought it was an important point.
Well, why it was sweet is because, we work so darn hard, and, we felt that the value of the service that the relocation industry provides was more valuable than a 6 or 7 multiple. And so to see a trend of deals going off at double digits, that's why I say sweet. It's like, wow, we're starting to get respect in terms of, as an industry, we're trading at probably a better value now. The other part why I would say sweet, down through the years in this industry or any other, bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. Better is better. And in a reverse fashion, I know when we went through our divestiture of the van line, the company became very internally focused, and there was certainly some fear associated to the workforce. And so now you take 2 companies that smush them together, and of course there's a lot of fear inside the workforce there. There's going to be a lot of internal focus there. And so from our point of view, it was like, okay, number 1 and number 3 are going to be very inwardly focused for the next 12, 18 months. And this creates a lane, if you will, for us to go out and be ever more articulate about our purpose, our mission, our values. And we know there is such an array of needs that different corporations have, and that no one style fits all. And we felt very confident and validated in what we kind of represent as a solution. There's still a good market for that out there. We're probably never going to be the transactional, low cost leader or otherwise. That's not our style. That's not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to set a new standard of experience, a new standard of really. I'm sorry for pausing for words there, but our mission is about the people we serve. And we have that benefit because we don't have external investors that have to be, satisfied. So what we have to do is make sure we perform in a way that we can provide continuous innovation and investment in the company, deepen and enrich the skill sets of our people, and at the end of the day, hopefully find some people that think that's valuable and it fits in their needs of how they want their people relocated.
Okay, and then obviously, if we now go forward, the Solarcasters deal has fallen apart, and let's not get into the detail. I know obviously it's before the courts, but that's fallen apart. Do you think that's the end of it, or do you think we're going to see more mergers coming? Do you think we're going to see more consolidation, maybe because of the cash crisis of COVID? Do you think we're going to see more mergers over the next 2 years?
I think that would be fair to expect, Brian. Hard to know exactly. You might see some, mid-size or smaller groups join together and create greater critical mass. I have no way of knowing, if number 1 and number 3 have a divorce, but then, number 1 winds up with a new dance partner. I really don't want to comment because it's just pure speculation in that regard. But if history is any indicator, in moments of crisis and businesses collapse, that's the perfect window where a lot of times companies are acquired and merged operations occur. So I think it's natural to expect we'll see that impacting our industry, and whether it's the moving companies, whether it's the RMCs, whether it's, who knows how far this will go, but I think that's to be expected. Okay,
and as we move on, I just want to bring in Nitzan and Julia again into the panel. So where are we? Nitzan and Julia. Right, got you all. And what I'd like to do is maybe just move on to this question of what the future is going to look like. And we were talking about this earlier in what I sort of laughingly refer to as our green room, which is before we go live with the broadcast, is that COVID has clearly been a wake-up call for the world, and has changed the world in ways we weren't expecting. But people are now arguing that the next thing that we need to address, and I hate to have a next thing, is climate change and sustainability. And I'm just wondering to what extent, maybe I'll start with you, Bill, and I know, Julia, you've got some views on it too. We'll come into is how do you think that climate change and sustainability is going to impact our industry?
Well, to a degree, I think it already has, and to the good credit of many people in the supply chain, again, whether it's the housing people and, whether it's the sustainability side of how they've evolved their operations. The moving companies, to a degree, have evolved their operations, whether through the equipment or materials utilized. I do think it is just going to become a more prominent part of basic corporate social responsibility, that as a business, you're either evaluating or being held accountable for, lower CO2, lower energy, lower all sorts of things. So long story short, I don't know if it'll ever be the ultimate business driver, or, there's competition based on who has got the most virtuous and most impactful CSR program. But I do believe it's going to be more than just a tick box in the selection process of providers, especially those that are supporting, the world's largest public companies.
Yeah, if I can say, I'll give a shout out. I don't think he's on this live cast. There's a guy called Dom Hammond, who's a partner at PwC, mobility technology partner. And he wrote a very interesting piece on LinkedIn the other day, which if you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. You owe me a beer, Dom. And in it was basically a conversation between him and his daughter in years to come. And his daughter was saying, just tell me how it was you used to work. And he's trying to explain that he went to an office and he'd wear a suit, and there were certain times, and she was saying, well, why weren't you at home? Why weren't you with me when I was young? And why did you destroy the planet by going on all those business trips, one-day business trips to something where you could have done it equally well by Zoom or whatever is the latest technology by the time that this conversation happened. And it was a lovely piece, but I do wonder whether we're all going to look at the way we do business now, and in particular the way we did business 3 months ago before this crisis started, and just say it was a different world, and it's not just about the virus, it's actually about saving the planet. And I think we've all noticed that the blue skies where we are, and that we talk about silver linings, but there's a real blue lining that's coming through. Julia, what's your view? I know it's something that you're quite focusing on.
Yes, I think this whole ESG agenda, environment, social governance, I think it's really going to be as equally as important as dealing with the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis. And I think it's coming from different angles, but one is risk. I mean, I think that a number of companies found that they weren't properly insured or covered for COVID-19. And I think that the whole risk industry and insurance is looking at that from a risk perspective. Then I think you see investors who are saying their investment strategy is going towards companies that have got control of climate risk. And then I think there's employee feelings, which are really strong and very important about climate risk. And then I think if you look at what's happening now, for example, in the airline industry, they're actually taking advantage of this current time to, for example, get rid of some of the older stocks of planes that are not so environmentally friendly. And almost every industry you speak to are really taking the climate risk agenda forward. So I think this will be front and center of what happens as we come out of the pandemic.
Okay, and Nitzan, from your perspective, I know obviously you come to it from a technology point of view. Do you think there's going to be technology solutions here that are going to change the way that we all work?
So yeah, I think the way we work has already changed, and in terms of the impact on sustainability, I'm a bit less optimistic than Bill and Julia. I think that will be a little bit secondary for the medium term. Comparing to health and safety, and just look at PPE, not the most environmental friendly thing, but the most important thing in order to be able to conduct any kind of medical treatment or work. So I think in the immediate, unfortunately, sustainability will go a little bit down on the priority, but will go up in the longer term, because the world will change forever, and things that started now will just accelerate adoption of technology, like we're having now in this session, but also in so many other ways that it's probably too early to even be able to point out. But definitely more change is coming.
Okay, well, more change is coming is not a bad way to end. I remember somebody once said that change is inevitable, apart from a vending machine. But just sort of to wrap up, and just looking at some of the comments that we've got, I think Lisa Johnson, sustainability and mobility is or was our top 2020 trend in Crown World Mobility's Trends Report this year. Such an important conversation. And perhaps I'll leave the last word to Kinga Youssef, who said, COVID made us realize how many things we've been taking for granted, and amen to that. We are out of time. It's been an absolute delight having Nitzan on the call, having you, Julia, as ever on the call, and especially having you, Bill. Read the comments afterwards on the LinkedIn field. The love for you out there, Bill, from people that you work with or have worked in the past with you, or who are your clients, is palpable. We really appreciate having you on the show. We will be back again same time next week. In other words, 4 o'clock British summer time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, which is our new time. And next week we've got Siobhan Cummins, Tracy Fiola, and Salman Chowdhury. And then we've got a very special guest the week after that as well, which I shall mention later on. So we are back here every week, and it's been a pleasure talking to you all, and it's been a pleasure talking to everybody out in there in LinkedIn. Any more comments, please let us know. And also, if you've enjoyed the video or the live cast, please do share it, tell your friends, tell your work colleagues. And that's been absolutely fabulous. So all that really remains is for me just to say thank you, guys, and thank you to everybody out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.